So the international break's behind us now. I think we're about 3 months out of the Euros. It looks like one or two players have emerged as potential squad members from the England team, certainly. So Kobbie Mainoo being the obvious one. So how do you think the squad looks now after the games against Brazil and Belgium?
I think it was quite a chaotic camp for England. You know, you sort of go right back to the start with the raft of withdrawals. You know, Harry Kane doesn't miss many games for England. He obviously missed both of these. Then there was the furore around Ben White, and that finally coming out that, you know, he'd refused to play for England, compounding an issue that they already had at fullback anyway with a number of other injuries. Then there was a whole row about the kit and the St George's Cross, which felt a little confected, but it seemed to irritate enough people to, you know, to justify it being in the news for several days. And then there were obviously further withdrawals during the camp, which meant call-ups, and Kobbie Mainoo was, I think, nothing sort of summed up the kind of slightly unpredictable, unmanaged nature of it. Like a teenager who wasn't even in the original squad, suddenly ending this fortnight, making an almost irrefutable case to be on the plane, and you know, Mainoo's a real positive to come out of it for Southgate, and I think it's not one to necessarily jump on the hype train, but I think it's difficult not to with him, just A, because of how comfortable and composed he seems to look at every level when he steps up, but B, he threatens to solve a problem that England have had for years, I mean decades really, that they've not been able to control games or have that authority against the leading sides in midfield, and he looks with Rice to have they're starting to have a combination. You know, little things like when they were coming out for the second half against Belgium, and Rice was right in his ear, and they were chatting, and then you could see they were pointing to various areas of the pitch and talking about how they were going to work together and things. And you just sort of thought already there seems to be a little bit of a connection that Southgate and England could develop hopefully over the summer. But yeah, I mean, the injury situation has really left him, I think, scratching his head. You know, he always gets a little bit frayed by the end of these camps, and you know, he said to one journalist, you know, I hope I don't see you again until May. You know, as a sort of, I want to go away now. I want to retreat back to Yorkshire now and think about where I'm at. And he's got a lot to ponder because he had a lot of injuries. And I think one of the consequences of that is that come May the 16th, when he names his provisional squad, I think it will be an expanded list because, you know, they've got injuries as it is, and then we're going into the busiest part of the season and the most intense part of the season. So, yeah, I don't want to be down on their chances because I think if everybody's available, they've got a really, really good chance of going all the way. Although I still think they'll lose to France, but yeah, there's a lack of clarity at this stage of the season that I think Southgate wish wasn't there.
Just on the whole chaotic nature of this international break, I was speaking to somebody over the weekend and they were saying that this is one reason why they feel that Gareth Southgate might call it a day at the end of the tournament, no matter whether it's for the Man United job or just have a break, because I think he gets sick of being asked about these off-field issues.
Yeah, he does.
And, you know, the England shirt was the latest one. I think there was a sense that, well, I was told he does not need to do a Churchillian speech on this one, which he has in the past, and he's almost become, you know, like England's foreign secretary at times, the fact that he's always very diplomatic and very kind of has a good opinion on things, and he can express himself much better than maybe a lot of his predecessors might have been, shall we say, on big issues. But I do think that by the end of it, by 10 days, he does seem to get hit with a lot of issues that an England manager shouldn't be dealing with. Yeah. And you can see that exasperation, you know, when he speaks to him at times, and there's a sigh there, isn't there? It's almost like, here we go again.
Well, I think that he is. I think I would go back further than that. I think he's gradually regressed in his desire to try and definitively answer these really complex off-field issues. If you think about all of the tournaments, I mean, you know, in Russia, I remember walking out of a press conference where he'd done the main FIFA press conference, and he was walking around to the mix zone to speak to some other reporters, and I just happened to be walking alongside him, and it was, I think it might have been after the quarter final, And I just sort of, he just spoke really well, really respectfully about the host nation, which, remember, the backdrop to that tournament was all about the Salisbury Novichok poisoning in the UK, and threatens to pull out, whether should England even be playing in this competition, tensions at a political level between England and Russia and the Western Russia and all of that stuff. And he was just plotting this path through it. And I remember saying to him, if you decide to jack this in, you could be Foreign Secretary. And he sort of laughed and kind of, took it in his sort of typical self-deprecating way. But I think then he had COVID, really, during Euro 2020. Then obviously there was all the off-field issues and controversies around the Qatar World Cup in the Middle East. And I think after that, he's got to a point where he just thinks, do you know what, what's the point in me really trying to engage in all of this? I think he felt a responsibility as England manager to try and address these complex issues and almost try and answer, settle these debates that go far and wide beyond football. But yeah, you're right. In the last sort of few camps, I think it's been pretty clear to see that he's kind of getting to the end of his tether, I think, with all the sort of hassle that comes with the job.
It just shows you, I think, what kind of pressures come with international match. And you're talking about Southgate possibly calling it quits after this tournament. If you were a pure football manager, someone who's been fantastic at club level, you might look at that international job, particularly England, and think, do I really want to be talking about, crisis in Russia or the situation in the Middle East, and think, well, no. My expertise level is in football. I think Gareth has done such a fantastic job that now it's going to be expected of England managers going forward that these issues crop up and you have to be able to address them. And Southgate's biggest win, in my opinion, since being England manager, is how statesmanlike he's been. Forget everything he's been able to achieve on the field. I just don't know where you're going to find that again if you have to move on from him.
I think that's why the FA have taken advantage of him a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because last week, the whole situation with the shirt, the chief exec was absolutely invisible. Now, this isn't an issue for the football manager to talk about. This is the boss, who ultimately should have had sign-off on whether this issue with the flag was right or wrong, but it was invisible, Mark Bullingham. And I think the FA, one of the reasons why they're so keen for Southgate to stay is because he gives them so much cover in the sense that he's so diplomatic. Now, let's just imagine if Sam Allardyce had stayed in charge of England. He would have knocked these questions out of the stadium because he wouldn't have addressed them at all. Now, I'm not saying that's a good thing, but I think Gareth Southgate has been taken advantage of for his nature, I guess, and his readiness to answer these questions. And I think now it's like we're saying, it's beginning to weigh on him, and he just wants to focus on the football, which, as we say, you can't just focus on the football all the time these days. But it's a heavy burden that he has to shoulder, and in many ways he's brought it on himself. But the FA haven't helped him in the sense that they could say, look, Gareth, we'll deal with this. You just talk about the football.
When was it like? I mean, if you went into the street and said, who's the current FA chairperson? How many people out of 10 are going to know? Debbie Hewitt, you don't really hear anything from her at all. Mark's similar. You might get a bit around the tournament, and normally that's early on to say, we think Gareth's doing a great job, we'd like him to stay. And let's be honest, they'd be desperate for him to stay through to 2026. And I think, Rob, you're right. The off-field stuff does make that job potentially off-putting to certain individuals. The thing that will make it the most appealing is the team. I mean, I think if they win the Euros, I could see Southgate staying for the World Cup and saying, well, look, let's go and have a crack at the biggest one of all, and get to 10 years, which would be an incredible achievement, and all that comes with it. I think if they fall short, it could easily, and I know we've talked about obviously the Manchester United situation, which is bubbling along in the background. I think the only way he stays really is if they win it.
Just back to the football side of it, on Kobbie Mainoo, we all agree that he's had a great couple of games, a couple of appearances. We've seen him a lot this season for Man United, myself and Rob, and it was obvious from the outset that he's got something about him. So why did Southgate not pick him for the squad in the first place? Because he was in the under-21s, it was all let's play it safe. He's obviously a talent. Is that not a mistake on Southgate's part? Has he got lucky now by actually the fact that he's injured?
I think he has. I mean, we did a story, I can't remember when it was now, it was a few weeks ago. I'd been told that essentially there was quite a few conversations between Gareth Southgate and Lee Carsley, the under-21 manager, to work out which squad he should go in. And I think there was a desire to not expose him too early to the bright lights of senior football. But I think, from what I'm told, I think what happened was that they initially thought, let's protect him, and then they took a look at the squads, the senior squad, and looked at the options they had available, because it is a real problem position.
But he's playing for Man United now. I think there's a bit of an arrogance on the FA's part there that the England team is much bigger than club football, because it isn't anymore. The Champions League is...
No, but he played 20 games.
But he's played for Man United.
He's played 20 senior matches in his career.
But he's playing for the biggest club in the Premier League, so the pressure that comes in a bad team, by the way, that he's dealing with that pressure. Now, Man United would probably say we prefer him not to go to the Euros because we want him to have a summer off and develop. But for England to think that, oh, let's protect him because it's a big environment. Well, friendly games at Wembley are not a big environment, even if it's Brazil. I think Man United is a different level of scrutiny.
I think from what I've been told as well, I think there's been conversations between United and England about the kind of character he is. And particularly at United in the summer when they knew that they were taking him on tour. We're not concerned is the wrong word, but we're wary that he's quite a shy, sort of reserved lad. And on tours in America, you have to do lots of press. And there was a press day that was done by Marriott, and he was meant to be put up for these interviews. He kind of made it known that he wasn't massively keen. So in the end, they put him with Varane and Dalot and Wan-Bissaka to kind of give him some help on the day. And even then, he kind of went, oh, I'm not really sure about it, and in the end got pulled out. So there's this kind of arrogance about his play when he's on the field, that kind of the confidence to kind of get the ball in tight spaces and move it dead quickly. I'm not entirely sure he's that kind of character off the field. And so when you're talking about moving from Man United to England, it's particularly something that Gareth is wary of, that kind of itch, that if you do chuck someone in, if there's a chance to kind of protect them then maybe you take that chance. I think possibly at the Liverpool game, the clamour was so high after that, and he's got such a problem at 6. He said that to us in that press conference after the Brazil game, that he's got such a problem at 6, is that even if there are slight concerns about is he the character to be able to handle not the pressure of playing on the field, but the kind of you call it the bright lights there, and it's intense, isn't it? The minute you get called up to England ahead of a major tournament, whether you can handle that. But because the clamour was so high after that Liverpool game, particularly the manner of which United won, his performance in that game, probably just...
Well, they put him up. I mean, they put him up.
Yeah.
He did radio interviews. I'm assuming he's done next to nothing.
He's done nothing at
United. Yeah, there you go. And yet one day in the England camp, and he's speaking to the radio.
England got a different way of doing it, haven't they?
Yeah.
And I remember United being panicked with Mason Greenwood, that they wouldn't let anyone speak to Mason Greenwood at all, to the point where PLP have got a rule where if you play a certain amount of games, you have to be put up. And he was scoring goals, and PLP had gone and said, right, it's a great time to do it. Like, it's all positive, let's do it. And they said, no, you can't do it. And pulled him out of it and took the fine in the end from Premier League Productions. And they were panicked that the minute that he got called up by England under-21s, that they don't have the same rules and would stick him straight up in front of the press. And that's exactly what happened. His first interview that he did, probably his only one in England, was done via the FA with a couple of journalists who covered the under-21 team. I
think that the reality is, though, that we all know that apart from Jude Bellingham, who at 20 is an incredible footballer and speaker off the pitch in terms of he's very confident in himself, most young players do find it difficult in front of the cameras or in that environment. From my experience, you don't really get a good interview out of a player until they're about 30 years old, until they've actually become experienced on the pitch and off it, and they're more comfortable to talk. If you're 18, 19, 20, especially if you talk about Kobbie Mainoo on the summer tour last year, he'd not really played for United, so he probably would have felt a bit of an imposter alongside people like Varane. So, but now I think the confidence comes from playing on the pitch. But I can totally understand protecting him off the pitch. But I think on the pitch, his performances have been so good. He's now United's number one midfielder, ahead of Casemiro, ahead of Scott McTominay. So I think protecting him from the England scene is just head in the sand stuff at times. I think you've got to go with it.
One other element to that, though, is that you don't tend to get in the squad that easily under Southgate. I think he's so conscious of culture, and he's worked so hard to get the players wanting to play for England again. I think sometimes we all know the argument about Phillips and Henderson, maybe he's Maguire, maybe he's too loyal to some of them. But I think he'd rather be too loyal and protect that kind of culture of I want to be here and I feel valued here, than having a kid come in out of nowhere and suddenly he's in a team. And it can be, this is not to say that Mainoo doesn't deserve everything he's got. I'm just saying that from a wider cultural point of view, I think he's so wary of that. You think about, Grealish was playing really well for a long time, couldn't get in the team, couldn't get in the squad. Maddison couldn't get in the squad for a long time. Ivan Toney, pre-ban, couldn't get in the squad for a long time. There are a number of Trent Alexander-Arnold couldn't get in the team for a long time when he won Champions Leagues at Liverpool. It tends to be a slow burner for Southgate. He wants a lot of evidence. He wants to know that there's a body of work there at club level that can then justify coming in. And then once you're in, it's then can be harder to go out than it should be.
I think the Mainoo situation may turn into like a real test for Southgate, because the accusation that's levelled at him is that he can be at times risk averse. And if you've got a situation now in the next, 2 months of the season, that Jordan Henderson plays all those games and stays fit, Calvin Phillips somehow gets back in the West Ham team, gets his confidence back and is fit, ready to go, that you've got Henderson and Phillips, who Southgate has used far more, has got far more trust in, and you've got a first game of the Euros and you've got to pick probably one of Henderson, Mainoo and Phillips. And the public will clamour for Mainoo. If he carries on his form, they'll say it's got to be Mainoo. 18, even if he's got 2 caps and played 30 senior games, it's got to be Mainoo. And the back of Southgate's mind will be thinking, yeah, but Phillips was really good at Euro 2020 and Henderson's never let me down. And it's going to turn into such, it feels like one of those Grealish decisions or Maddison decisions or Foden at the last World Cup, where people are screaming at him to show that he can take a risk. And I don't know whether he's got that in his mindset to be able to do it.
You'll hear a lot of talk about balance.
Yeah.
Because you're absolutely right. I mean, look, if you look at the 2 games, and we talked about this previously, but I think he's torn a bit between 4-2-3-1, which gives him a little bit more solidity in midfield and allows Bellingham to play as a 10 and go and influence the game further forward, or a 4-3-3 where you're relying on Declan Rice as your single pivot, your 6 to mop up. And you look at the goals that, the counter-attack chances that England conceded against Belgium. I know there were obviously defensive errors, particularly the first one with Jordan Pickford. But England don't possess a centre-back pairing that's good enough and is not quick enough, particularly when you take Kyle Walker out of that back four. There's actually not a lot of pace in that back four at all. And if you're asking a team to go and dominate, to go and dictate, and you've only got one defensive midfielder who's just trying to cover all that ground ahead of you, you can see a scenario where in the summer Southgate if he listens to all of this noise, take the handbrake off, Gareth, go and play these kids, go and get as many attacking players in the team as you can. You can see a scenario where a team that's very, very good on the break does what Belgium did to them.
Exactly what has happened at Man United when Maguire's played at centre half. He's not quick enough to defend high up the field. He has to defend on the halfway line. There's a huge gap between your defence and your forward players. You've got a holding midfield player. In United's case, it's Casemiro, who's been told that he's got to cover half the field, and then people wonder why he's been dribbled past 20 times. The reason is the gap in the midfield is so massive, and I've seen it when England play major tournaments again and again and again. The game gets massively stretched and England can't cope. And you're right, it's because they haven't got that pace at the back to squeeze high up the field like Arsenal would or City would.
That's why Walker is so vital to that back four. Absolutely pivotal.
Just on the back four, has one of the big beneficiaries of this break been Joe Gomez, in the sense that he can play in every position across the back, and we've seen with injuries and what have you at the moment that he can play left back, right back, centre half. He's going to go to the Euros.
It's like the major tournament golden ticket, isn't he, really? Like at Carragher, you play left back, right back, centre half, you go because you can cover so many different scenarios.
Well, particularly because left back is a really big problem. Luke Shaw, he absolutely adores Luke Shaw. I think if Luke Shaw's, on one leg, he'll still probably go.
Just a question on that then, right? Southgate said during this camp that he doesn't think that Luke Shaw can play 7 games at Euros.
Yeah.
Do you think that if he knows that, Luke Shaw should go?
Should he go? Probably not. Will he go? Yes, if he's even half fit. And he'll play Trippier at left back in the other games. I think, assuming it's a level playing field where the senior options are fit, I think it would be an alternating left back situation between Trippier and Luke Shaw.
It's not a great endorsement of Ben Chilwell. I know he's not had a great international break, but to basically say that you're going to take a guy who's possibly on one leg.
Well, Chilwell's had his own fitness problems. Yeah. I mean, he started both games because he's short of matches. He came on as a sub, I think, in the Leicester FA Cup quarter-final at Stamford Bridge. But he's not played a lot of football in the last month, and there's no guarantee really that he's going to stay fit in the next 2 months either. I mean, he's had some real problems on that front. Chilwell's got a case if he finishes the season strongly, and I think if Shaw can't go, if he doesn't prove his fitness, then it's Chilwell and Trippier. It's funny how fullback was such a area of strength a year, 18 months ago, and yet now someone like Ben White doesn't want to play for England. Trent Alexander-Arnold's a midfielder. Reece James has kind of fallen off the face of the cliff because of injuries, and suddenly we're looking at Kyle Walker, what is he, 32, 33, thinking we're relying on his pace
it's that thing,
at that age to shut out that major issue we've been talking about.